While Israel's allies rally, what about Iran? Russia's calculated silence in a regional war as tensions escalate in the Middle East. Israel's allies, particularly the United States and several European powers, have openly lined up in support of Tel Aviv. Their responses have been fast, vocal, and material, reaffirming Israel's position as a state backed by a formidable international coalition. But what about Iran? Who does Tehran lean on when conflict flares? Unlike Israel, Iran lacks a strong web of formal military alliances. However, it does have two heavyweight partners, Russia and China. Though neither country is bound to Tehran by treaty, both share deep strategic interests with the Iranian regime. Tonight we focus on Russia, whose position in this unfolding crisis is complex, calculated, and critical. Russia's position so far: condemnation, then silence from the onset of hostilities. Russia made its stance clear, at least publicly. Moscow condemned Israel's airstrikes on Iran, calling them a violation of international law. This was consistent with Russia's broader geopolitical narrative, often aimed at counterbalancing US and Israeli actions in the region. Shortly after, President Vladimir Putin offered Russia's services as a mediator, according to the Kremlin. Moscow was prepared to facilitate peace talks if both sides were willing. But that offer was quietly turned down by Israel. As Russian officials later admitted, there appeared to be no interest from the Israeli side in pursuing diplomatic negotiations.
You know, the Russian side, and President Putin in particular, said that Russia would be ready to provide such mediation services if necessary. At the moment, we see an unwillingness, at least from the side of Israel, to turn to any mediation services and generally enter a peaceful settlement path.
This rejection did not come as a surprise to many observers. Israel currently holds the upper hand militarily and is determined to maintain that advantage. For Tel Aviv, mediation, especially by a non-Western power like Russia, would represent a concession it's not ready to make. Had Putin been accepted as a mediator, it would have significantly elevated his global diplomatic standing, especially at a time when his image is under strain due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. For Iran, such mediation would have likely been welcomed, but with Israel uninterested in talks, Russia now finds itself without a seat at the table, neither mediating, nor intervening, nor materially supporting Iran. What's at stake for Russia? Even from the sidelines, Russia has a lot to lose in this war. Iran represents one of Moscow's most important strategic partners in West Asia. While trade between the two nations exists, the real glue binding them is mutual opposition to the West. Both Moscow and Tehran are heavily sanctioned by Western powers. This shared isolation has given rise to a form of solidarity, one based not on ideology or economics, but survival and strategy. This alliance has played out most notably in Syria. When Syria plunged into civil war, the Assad regime teetered on the edge of collapse. Iran stepped in first, supplying cash, weapons, and militias to prop up Bashar al-Assad. In 2015, Russia joined the fight, deploying its air force and turning the tide of the war. Together, Iran and Russia helped preserve the Assad regime, reshaping Syria's political future and proving the effectiveness of their cooperation. At one point, Russia was even operating from Iranian air bases to carry out bombing runs in Syria, a rare move underscoring just how close their military cooperation had become. A long-term military pact earlier this year, that partnership took a more formal shape. Russia and Iran signed a 20-year strategic military agreement, outlining deeper cooperation in weapons trade, joint military exercises, and the development of advanced technologies. It's a long-term vision designed to outlast any single conflict. But the agreement has limitations. Notably, it does not include any mutual defense clause. That means Russia is under no obligation to defend Iran if attacked, just as Iran was under no obligation to support Russia when it invaded Ukraine. Still, the option of weapons transfers remains on the table, a one-way street so far since 2022. Iran has been a key arms supplier to Russia, particularly in the Ukraine conflict. Tehran has reportedly sent over 3,000 drones, many of which have been used in Russian strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure and military targets. Now, Tehran is looking for a return gesture. Iran already uses Russian military hardware, including the S-300 air defense system and MiG fighter jets, but it wants more possibly. Access to Russia's more sophisticated arsenal like the S-400 missile defense system or the Su-57 stealth fighter. So far, Putin has shown no signs of reciprocating. He is deeply entangled in Ukraine, where the Russian military is stretched thin and cannot afford to divert valuable resources elsewhere. The cost of arming Iran could be high economically, diplomatically, and militarily. This isn't the first time Putin has held back during critical stages of the Syrian conflict, when rebel forces were making advances, many expected Russia to intervene more aggressively. But in some key instances, Putin chose restraint and those decisions had consequences. Assad's grip eventually weakened significantly. Today, Syria remains fractured, and Putin's cautious posture in that conflict may offer insight into his approach now. What could change Putin's mind? Despite his current hesitation, Putin is not a predictable actor. He has a history of unexpected moves, military, diplomatic, and strategic. So what factors could alter his position? Gulf state relationships. Russia is now a major player in the OPEC Plus oil cartel, which includes key Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. These countries work closely with Russia to control oil production and stabilize prices. But if the Israel-Iran conflict spirals and Iranian proxies or missiles begin to target Gulf assets, these states could be pulled into the chaos. For Putin, that would be a diplomatic nightmare, one that could unravel years of careful engagement with the Gulf, the war in Ukraine. 2025 is a decisive year for Russia's campaign in Ukraine. With growing calls for peace talks, especially from figures like Donald Trump, Moscow is under pressure to achieve as much as possible on the battlefield before any negotiations begin. A full-blown conflict involving Iran would be a costly distraction, diverting resources and attention away from Putin's primary objective. A diplomatic window should this war drag on without resolution. International pressure for peace talks could rise. If Iran seeks negotiations, it will need a mediator it trusts. The United States and most European countries are unlikely candidates. Russia, having mediated in the 2015 nuclear deal, could be Tehran's preferred broker once again. That previous agreement, which included the US, UK, France, Germany, China, and Russia, positioned Moscow as a credible player. Iran would gladly have Putin at the table again if diplomacy ever becomes an option, the current reality. But as it stands today, Israel remains focused on achieving its objectives through military means. It sees no need for mediation, no pressure to pause, and no reason to concede. And with that, Russia is left watching from the sidelines, boxed out of diplomacy and too entangled in Ukraine to intervene militarily. Conclusion: Russia's silence is strategic, not passive. The Kremlin is weighing its options, calculating risks, and preserving flexibility. Iran may want its partner to step up, but for now, Putin is content to watch and wait. Whether that changes will depend on how the battlefield shifts, how long the conflict lasts, and whether diplomacy reopens a door that's currently closed. Until then, Moscow's role remains one of quiet calculation, not open confrontation.